Hello, what's up fam? Welcome to my channel. My name is Steve. My channel is Re-Vera. And in this video I wanted to go back to the core purpose of this channel. The reason it's named Re-Vera is that truth matters. And one of the reasons truth matters is because I believe, and I don't see any way around it, that an intellectually honest, methodological search for the most accurate knowledge of reality is the best way we humans have to resolve differences, especially differences that we have strong emotional feelings about. And this is important. This has become topical because I've made the videos about voting for Biden, and apparently this is a very controversial thing among a lot of the left. So I had the one debate with the Swoletariat, and he was a good sport. We had a good talk. He agreed with voting with Biden with some qualifications, so you should definitely watch the conversation on his channel. I'll probably get permission from him to post it on my channel at some point. I keep forgetting. But anyway, that's the public debate I've had. I've had scores of debates on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit in the last couple of weeks, and I'm honestly kind of sick of the issue, but it's fucking important, so I just can't let it drop. But when we have a disagreement like this, if you disagree with me that voting for Biden is the right thing to do, you probably have strong emotional feelings about it. And if you're a leftist, I'm going to feel with my feelings and my biases that the reason you disagree is because you have all these feelings about Bernie losing, and you're disappointed and you're frustrated with the DNC, and it's all feelings based without a real strategy. So using ad hoc justification to justify a position that fits with your feelings. But you're going to say that I'm the one who's working based off of my feelings out of fear because of the risk of Trump, or because of propaganda from the establishment about the two-party system, or what have you. And if we know anything about human psychology and the attempt to search for truth, it's that cognitive biases warp our judgment in ways we are ourselves blind to. That is a fact that an absolute metric fuckton of sociological research proves inarguably. And you shouldn't even need to look at the research, because if you look at people you disagree with, it's really easy to see their biases. It's a lot harder to see your own biases or the biases of people you agree with. So, given that, how can we come to consensus? How can we figure out which one of us is wrong when we have these strong feelings and personal investment and cognitive biases surrounding the issue? Well, I posit the only way to do that is intellectually honest. Now, what does that mean? When you're intellectually dishonest, that doesn't mean you're lying on purpose. Dishonesty is stating falsehoods with the intention to state falsehoods. Intellectual dishonesty is not intentional. You're just being dishonest in that you're not using sound methodologies to correct for bias. So, for instance, you're using rhetorical fallacies, you're arguing from anecdotes, stuff like that. It's not intellectually honest. It's not actually being methodological in your pursuit of truth. So, if we're being methodological, which in this context, what I mean is premise for premise, like it's a logical kind of discussion. We have premises, you determine if they're logical and if they're sound and valid, and go from there. Because if you can challenge it, any of the validity or soundness of any of the premises, then you can show that's wrong. If you can't, you need to accept it. That's how logic works. And it helps frame the discussion when you're methodological, because it keeps you from wandering all over the place and red herrings and this and that. It's like, this premise, is it sound? One thing at a time. And that's the kind of argument I want, and that's why I've framed the $500 challenge like that. the Swolitariat kind of ended up agreeing with voting for Biden with the qualifications. So we talked about the qualifications for a while, and I didn't actually map out the logic like I wanted to. But it's very simple. And it starts with the three horns of the dilemma here, which is you have a choice between greater evil, lesser evil, and choosing not to choose. Which of the three options leads to the least evil? Seems pretty obvious to me that the lesser evil does. So, just to expound on that a little bit, let's take it out of this context and put it in another context with a metaphor, just for people, because there are people who will choose not to choose because they don't want to vote for evil. That's an argument I hear from people who won't vote for Biden quite a bit. So let's say you're in a small tribe of people, like 20, 30, whatever, and you're like in captivity, being held by a much larger force, and they give you the choice with a deadline, 10 minutes or by the end of the day or whatever, to choose whether they're going to kill 10 puppies or 5 puppies. And of course, and in this context, a sizable percentage of your little tribe there are part of a religious sect that believes that sacrificing animals brings pleasure from the gods. So you know that there are going to be people voting for that. You also know there's going to be a lot of people voting for the lesser evil, killing 5 puppies, because they don't want to have 10 puppies killed, and because there isn't an option for 0. But there will be, always is, 1, 2, 3 people who refuse to vote for evil. They'll be like, I'm going to make a symbolic vote in favor of killing no puppies. Well, which one of the votes actually reduces evil? Because if you make a symbolic vote that's not one of the 2 options, then you're not voting. And if it turns out that 10 puppies get killed and your vote for 5 could have saved 5 puppies' lives, then you're morally responsible for not saving those 5 puppies. You're not morally responsible for killing the 5 puppies because you didn't have that choice. Does that make sense? Now, obviously we don't want to allow this kind of decision to be foisted upon us on a regular basis. So if we're trapped in this situation, we need to figure out how to change the system, obviously. We got to figure out how we can escape, or how we can change the minds of our captors and the religious cultists who want to just kill animals to please the gods. Whatever it is, we have to find a way to change the system. We have to figure out how the system is vulnerable. We have to escape this choice being forced upon us. And I fully support that. So in the real world, you do that with direct action, with organizing, with winning people over to leftists, so we have more politically engaged leftists. Because if we can just get to fucking 5%, we can win primaries. Because in the real world, primaries are where the system is most vulnerable. I've said the math before, but it's pretty fucking simple. 5% of the population will win any presidential primary from either party in modern history, if I'm not mistaken. I've looked at a few elections, not all of them. 5%. How much do you need to win as a third party? You need over 50% of the electoral college. And if you're a third party running against 2 other parties that have all the weight, the strength of the political establishment behind them, you're not going to fucking hit 50%, especially if you couldn't hit the 5%. You can't go from 5% to 50% in a matter of a few months. It cannot happen. The only thing that can possibly happen is that you spoil it for the person who least represents your values, the greater evil. And that's didn't even happen in 2016 because they're not relevant enough. The third-party voters will tell me this all the time, that, we that's a myth. We didn't give it to the other party. I didn't say you did. I'm just saying that's the only possibility. Being so irrelevant, you couldn't even spoil the election, isn't an argument for voting third party. It's an argument for irrelevance. Bernie won more concessions from the Democrats by losing the primaries than every third-party run in modern history has, because that's zeroed. Nobody gives third parties concessions. They're not in the party. There's no reason to. They're the enemy. And usually they're so irrelevant they don't even fucking think about them. So, I mean, that's some hard truth, but it's the truth. And if you disagree, come at it methodologically. That's all I ask. Because I know it's difficult when you're invested in a position, when you disagree, when you have strong feelings, but counter the logic. Greater evil, lesser evil, no, choose not to choose. Which of these it leads to the lesser evil? I think that scenario stands on its own. So if you're going to challenge it, you have to either show that Biden's not the lesser evil, or that there's a real choice other than choosing not to choose. And neither one of those is justifiable. You cannot do it. You can't go from winning 1% with the Green Party last cycle to over 50% of the Electoral College this cycle. Not going to happen. So there isn't another option. And if you don't think that Biden's the lesser evil, you're very politically invested. You're very biased. And I just encourage you to look at more issues. You're keeping a very close look at it, and you're looking at it only in certain contexts. And a lot of these people who refuse to vote for Biden, they're looking at his past record, which is something you should look at, but you also have to look at his current platform, because the official political platform of a presidential candidate is not irrelevant. I don't think Joe Biden's going to fight for those things. But if we manage to win the House and Senate and those things got put to his desk to sign, he's not going to veto them. He can't. They were on his platform. So no, I don't think he'll fight for him, but it's a hell of a lot more likely to happen under a Joe Biden president if it's on his platform than under a Donald Trump presidency. Look at his platform. It's quite good. You know, if you don't think he's the lesser evil, look at the concentration camps. They're literal concentration camps. They're filled to overflowing. We're locking up legal asylum seekers, legal by international law that the U.S. has agreed to. Thus, by our Constitution, it is legally binding on the United States that they are legal asylum seekers, and we're locking them up in conditions it would be illegal for us to keep serial killers in. Like, we have laws guiding the conditions we can keep prisoners in, but those laws don't apply to illegal immigrants because they're not citizens. So they're in conditions we can't legally keep, like the Boston Marathon bomber in. That's fucked up. And so I'm sorry, there's something going on over there. I'll have to check on it. So to wrap up, concentration camps, mega bad. Forced sterilizations. They're getting sprayed with chemicals that are super toxic. And now, of course, what people come back with is that who built those camps? Yes, Obama and Biden did, because they're the lesser evil. I'm not arguing they're good. They're the lesser evil. They didn't put in a zero tolerance policy that forced every single illegal immigrant and a legal asylum seeker into these concentration camps. They didn't do that. They didn't do anything close to that. They didn't have constant anti-immigrant rhetoric that demonized these people and emboldened ICE and Border Patrol to mistreat people, as well as actual neo-Nazis and like fucking militias of patrolling the border and shit like this. They didn't do that. They didn't have this constant anti-immigrant rhetoric. That matters. That makes them the lesser evil. Now look up Joe Biden's platform on immigrants and illegal immigrants, and you'll see that it's a fuck ton better than Trump's. So he's clearly the lesser evil on that issue. He's clearly the lesser evil when it comes to democracy. And here again, third-party supporters or people not voting for Biden will always say, well, you think the Democrats support democracy? Look at how they rigged the primaries. First off, they don't rig the primaries. It's anti-democratic to claim that without very strong evidence, because rigging the primaries would mean that voting's pointless. And if you're making the argument voting in the primary is pointless, that discourages people from voting, and that keeps us from ever fucking winning it. So in order to argue that, you would have to argue that they're like straight up faking vote totals. But that you can't get away with that. You have to have some trust in the system. Do they lean on the scales? Of course they do. They close some polling locations at the last minute, dirty stuff like that. Iowa, of course, was all kinds of fucked up, but that got brought to light because you had Bernie supporters all the fuck over the place watching everything. And they were watching the totals themselves and reporting it. And you can get your own people in there to help count stuff. It would take a massive fucking conspiracy to hide all that. So they can't just straight up make the election up. Now, some people might say that if you could win a majority of the elected delegates and then get to the convention and the DNC could be like, nope, we're going to put somebody who didn't even run as president. We're going to pick Hillary Clinton. And yes, that is possible. But that would be the time to start a third party. Because it takes a fucking revolution to displace a two-party system. And in this case, it'd be a political revolution. And in a revolution, the success or failure of it is entirely about picking the moment. There's a lot of socialists who believe in revolution. Most of them are smart enough to know you can't just take you and your two buddies and go attack a military base. That's not going to happen. Revolutions succeed or fail based on timing. Political revolutions happen the same way. You can't just displace the two-party system because you don't like it. There's been a third-party challenges in probably every election in U.S. history, and they haven't succeeded in living memory. And they won't, because the two-party system's only gotten stronger and stronger. But if the Democrats refuse to nominate as their candidate the person who won the most delegates, that would be a flashpoint. That would be the time for the progressive candidate who's denied the election to stand up and say, okay, the Democrats won't be democratic. Fuck them, we're starting a workers' party. This is what I was saying Bernie should do if this scenario happened to him. And that would have a high probability of being successful. Because mainstream Democrats, because if the Democrats refuse to put the person as their candidate who won the most delegates, they would lose that election 100%. And Democrats would lose up and down the ballot all over the fucking country. And every single Democrat voter knows that. Now, the DNC doesn't care. They'd rather lose than have progressives in power. I know that. But mainstream Democrats, the actual voters, they don't want to lose either. They would be incensed as well because they don't want to fucking lose. And there's a whole lot of independents, and the Workers' Party in that situation could explode and do quite well. Probably wouldn't win that first election. But if they won more than the Democrats, then they're viewed as now the second party. And Democrats become a third party in ensuing elections. That's how the parties can shift in a two-party system. It's still a two-party system. You've just kicked out one of the parties and replaced them. So if the Workers' Party in this case won more than the Democrat Party, then in future elections, Democrat Party is just going to become less and less relevant. And then you can actually start winning elections moving forward. So that's the only time a third party could be successful, but it relies on us winning a primary first and being denied. You can't argue the fact that the system is most vulnerable, electorally at least, at the primary level. If you can't win a primary, you will not win a revolution or a third party run. You just can't. So, that said, yes, Joe Biden's more supports democracy more than Trump. He didn't attack the USPS during a pandemic so that votes wouldn't get counted. He's not refusing to accept the results of the election, which is anti-democratic. He didn't, on TV, ask Russia and China to interfere in our election. And every time I say that, people say, Russiagate's been debunked. Well, no. He asked them on TV. You can see it. It's out there. That's what I just stated is not in contention. It's also not in contention that Russia interfered in our election. A bipartisan Senate committee just confirmed that in August. And you should realize what a fucking big deal about that is, because virtually every goddamn Republican is a Trump sycophant. If you get bipartisan approval on that, that's overwhelming evidence that it's true. So yes, there has been interference in our election by hostile foreign states. And yes, that's not a good thing. And worse yet, Trump has canceled election security briefings to Congress, basically green-lighting them to try again. Last cycle, we have documented evidence that they hacked into registration databases. Now, there's no evidence that they changed any vote totals, but that shows they got pretty fucking close. If we're refusing to beef up our election infrastructure and refusing to do election security briefings, what's to say it's not going to get even worse this election and then every election after that if we don't fucking fix shit? We need to beat Trump by voting for Biden because we will not have democracy if we don't. He's attacking democracy literally every way he possibly can in his position. That makes him the greater evil. That means we have to vote for Biden because he's the lesser evil. This is an inescapable logical trilemma, and only one of the options leads to the least evil. And if you disagree, I'd love to see why if you do it methodologically. Show me evidence. Show me exactly how that reasoning fails. Nobody's succeeded. Most people don't even freaking try. They just throw out memes and call you names, and then they go back to their little huddle, their little safe space where everybody's posting anti-Biden memes. But if you value truth, if you care about this country, if you care about making the world a better place, I encourage you to tackle your feelings head on and do it methodologically. Do it right. Don't try to escape the truth. Confront it. And because it will be best for all of us in the long run. If I'm wrong, I want to know. If there's a better strategy than voting Biden, I want to fucking know so I can promote it on this channel and so I can partake in it myself. That's why I'm willing to pay $500 to somebody who proves me wrong methodologically. But if you can't do that, we got to man the fuck up and vote for Biden, even if it's something we don't want to do, because it's the best option we have. So again, love to get your feedback. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I have ways to contact me if you want to DM me. If you want to discuss something in private instead of in public, I'm typically down for that too. So just let me know. Thanks. Have a good one.